From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
It was an extraordinary week in American politics in what has already been an extraordinary year. Donald Trump this week capped the Republican Party convention in Milwaukee with a 90-minute speech that was partly a little different Donald Trump than we've seen and partly the same old president you always knew. We'll break down the speech and the convention week. Plus, leading Democrats put an even tougher squeeze on President Biden to withdraw from the presidential race. As the president catches COVID, he is cloistered in Delaware and considering his political future. Some in the Democratic press are saying he could announce his withdrawal as early as this weekend. Welcome to Potomac Watch. I'm Paul Gigot, editor of the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal. I'm here with my colleague Kyle Peterson, who is with me in Milwaukee this week. And also joining us is a veteran of many conventions and a former presidential speechwriter who's, of course, a Wall Street Journal columnist, Bill McGurn. Welcome, gentlemen. Let's start with Donald Trump's speech, which was, in my view, really two speeches. The first 25 minutes or so were an account of his near assassination. Trump talked in calm and almost hushed tones, showing a vulnerable, humble side that we rarely see. And he also talked about uniting the country. Let's listen.
Together we will launch a new era of safety, prosperity, and freedom for citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed. The discord and division in our society must be healed. We must heal it quickly. As Americans, we are bound together by a single fate and a shared destiny. We rise together or we fall apart. I am running to be president for all of America, not half of America, because there is no victory in winning for half of America.
Bill, I thought that was the best moment of the speech. What did you think?
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'm a speechwriter who believes less is more. Clearly, Donald Trump doesn't believe that. And a lot of principals who give speeches, they do the same thing. Obviously, he had one speech going into the convention, then he shot. He said he's going to change it. And I think he made a mistake by trying to deliver both. You get the worst of both worlds. You step on your best lines like that by going on. And 90 minutes, I think that's the all-time record for an acceptance speech.
It's the all-time record by quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's longer than many State of the Unions, which have to leave time for congressional applause and so forth. So I think that's a mistake. I think if he had not gone on, if he had ended after 30 or 40 minutes, the focus would all be on lines like that. And because he went on, he kind of lost some energy and so forth. But that said, an acceptance speech is not what gets you elected. I don't think it'll matter much in the scheme of things. But I do think he started out really strong and kind of squandered that with an extra hour.
Kyle, that first half hour, 25 minutes or so, where he was talking about in very detailed terms what his experience had been on that stage in Butler, Pennsylvania, were gripping. And the way he conveyed it in subdued, in some ways almost solemn terms, I think was effective.
I thought it was an extraordinary moment in American politics, a leading presidential candidate and former president describing an assassination attempt against him that he survived less than a week beforehand. I agree with you entirely that I think that many Democrats were not happy when they saw the beginning of that speech, thinking that this guy's going to win, and not only would this guy win in November, this guy might not have lost the 2020 election. He was subdued. He was almost, dare I say, presidential. He seemed a little bit chastened. He said he would explain this story one time because it was too painful to go through again. He said that he's very lucky he shouldn't be here tonight, and the crowd responded to that and said that he should, and he said, no, really, I shouldn't be here tonight. And then it was a bit of a strange turn. The line from our colleague James Toronto on the web this morning is that he went to a nomination speech and a Trump rally broke out. And it was back to the old kind of riffs that you see from Trump when he is campaigning in these swing states. And to be clear, sometimes he can be charming and he can be funny. There was a line about he was thanking Milwaukee and Wisconsin for hosting the convention and then said something to the effect of, yes, I am trying to buy your vote. I hope you remember that. That was a bit funny. party. He thanked the people who spoke before him, including Kid Rock, also known as Bob. I thought that was a bit funny. Robert Ritchie, I suppose, is his name. I don't know if he goes by Bob, but a little bit of classic Trump there. But then on the other hand, I think there were probably people that were drifting off to bed or thinking, what is he doing talking again about the late, great Hannibal Lecter? Why are we here at a presidential speech bringing up fictional cannibals? And so then by the end, I think Democrats were thinking, maybe we do have an opportunity against this guy still.
On that point of his final hour or so, let's listen to a couple of clips on airing some traditional Trumpian grievances.
Iran was going to make a deal with us, and then we had that horrible, horrible result that we'll never let happen again. The election result, we're never going to let that happen again. They used COVID to cheat. We're never going to let it happen again. And they took off all the sanctions, and they did everything possible for Iran. And now Iran is very close to having a nuclear weapon, which would have never happened. This is a shame what this administration, the damage that this administration has done. If you took the 10 worst presidents in the history of the United States, think of it, the 10 worst, added them up, they will not have done the damage that Biden has done. Only going to use the term once. Biden. I'm not going to use the name anymore, just one time. The damage that he's done to this country is unthinkable.
Bill, the president was clearly ad-libbing for minutes at a time, maybe 5-10 minutes at a time. People who were in the arena or colleagues who had a look at the teleprompter could see it's not moving there for long periods. And I wonder if you think that there's a couple of speechwriters in that arena who were rending their garments in frustration at their speech they wrote being overcome by all the ad libs.
Paul, speechwriters always do that when someone doesn't give the speech we prepared for them. So that's not unusual. It's just what was unusual is kind of the time, and that the parts that he added were so different from the first part of speech. As I say, in the scheme of things, I don't think it really matters too much. It was a very successful convention and so forth. I do think it could have been a real moment if he had just ended at 30 minutes. But again, do I think the election is going to hinge on it? No, it's going to be forgotten in 2 or 3 days.
All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll have more on Donald Trump's nomination acceptance speech and the Republican convention when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal here on our daily Potomac Watch podcast. And I'm here with Bill McGurn and Kyle Peterson. Kyle, I want to ask you if you agree with Bill that this probably will not matter. The speech will not matter in the scheme of things. What do you think?
I do agree that this singular speech is not going to be the make or break moment for either of these candidates. But I do think that Democrats are probably wondering to themselves, if this is Donald Trump still, after everything that has happened in the last week, on his best behavior at a convention in front of a friendly crowd with a teleprompter, a written speech focusing on unity, then what is he going to be back to in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 2 months as we get closer to the November election? If the polls tighten again anymore, and is he going to be back to his same old rhetorical ways? I mean, there were some elements of that again on stage. He brought up the cheating in the 2020 election, as he calls it, saying that they used COVID to cheat. And again, if that is what he says when he is at his best, amid all the pageantry of the Republican National Convention, will he be raging about it again in 2 months? And that is the kind of thing that I think turns off swing voters, causes the party to lose many suburban voters, women voters. The 2020 election, despite what Trump says, was not lost in big cities. In fact, he did better, got a higher share of the vote in Milwaukee and in Philadelphia than he did in 2016. It was lost everywhere else in suburbs, collar counties, and so forth. And the Republican Party was doubling down on going after working class votes in the convention, and there was not much that was aimed at trying to get back those suburban women that the party lost in 2020. So I do think that while the speech itself is not going to be pivotal, it is kind of a signal to Democrats that maybe they still have an opportunity to prod Trump into blowing up later on.
Let's listen to one of his Trumpian moments about president as peacemaker.
I had no wars other than ISIS, which I defeated, but that was a war that was started. We had no wars. I could stop wars with a telephone call. I could stop wars with just a telephone call. If properly stated, it would never start.
Well, there you go. Typical Trumpian boast. Bill, I'm afraid I tend to agree with Kyle in this sense. You know, the last hour of the speech showed, I think, an example of Trump's self-indulgence, lack of discipline, hyperbole, some of which is funny, as Kyle said, some of which people discount. But a lot of it is also a character trait that came across sometimes in the first term. For example, when he's fighting with reporters about COVID, that really overwhelmed his message often. And I think a lot of Democrats looked at that part of the speech last night and said, you know what? I think this guy is still beatable.
Yeah, I think they might have. But again, look, whose problems would you rather have, Joe Biden's or Donald Trump? Donald Trump is ahead in the polls in these swing states. I expect he'll get a big bump out of this convention. The problem is Donald Trump's addressing two different audiences. Inside the room, I think the people are mostly like the people at his rallies, supportive, enthusiastic, and so forth. They like the stuff that bothers a lot of the other people, the media and so forth. But for the people outside, who are watching TV, say, maybe I'll give this guy another look. I think he missed an opportunity to stick with trying to appeal them to his point about being the president for everyone.
Right.
But so far, I don't think the polls reflect, Trump is really vulnerable. I think it's close, but the poll news all seems to be favorable toward him. And now we have polls showing Kamala does slightly better, but I don't think that's because she is doing better. I think it's because Joe is sinking.
Well, we're going to get to the Democrats here in a bit. Let's kind of sum up the Republican convention overall impressions that some of you had. One thing that I find a little off-putting is the way too much Trump family here. I mean, they got 3 generations up there on the stage. The granddaughter is charming, intended to soften the image of Donald Trump, fine. But both Eric Trump and Don Jr.'s speeches, I thought, are a little too much for me. And there's just an odd quality of dynastic quality to this convention that I don't think even the Bushes, who actually had something of a dynasty, would have indulged in. But overall, Kyle, the convention, and you and I are both there, really a lot of optimism, a lot of confidence, a lot of good cheer, and not a lot of rancor at all, or concern or worry. Behind the scenes, some concern off the record about J.D. Vance and his foreign policy views and his economic views. But overall, a pretty good show. But
the focus, I agree with you, is on the personalities. And Republicans at this convention were united, and they were never more united when they were calling for unity. But unity to do what? I expect that we are going to see some Republican disunity again here pretty quick, because I think that some of the real disagreements in the party about the direction to go have, for the purposes of this convention, and that's what political parties do, have been kind of papered over with some red, white, and blue bunting for now. Nikki Haley was at the convention and said she was asked to speak about unity. It was a gracious invitation for Trump, and she was happy to do that, but spoke with a little bit of tepid support for the president, presenting him as someone that she agrees with more than she disagrees with, as someone who's a better option and with better policy for the country than another 4 years of Biden or 4 more years of President Harris. But again, I think that once the rubber meets the road, the party has watered down its platform, taken out some of the ambitious policy proposals that were in the 2016 platform, made it more of an economic nationalist, to use that term, document. And so if President Trump gets reelected, when we get back to business here in Congress, is a Republican House really going to pass a bill to exempt tips from taxation? Is it going to re-up some aid, some weapons for the defenders in Ukraine? Is it going to do anything to shore up Social Security and Medicare as we look at these deadlines on the entitlement state, these benefit cuts that are coming in a little less than a decade? I think that there is a lot of unity that was on display, but it's the kind of unity that Mike Johnson, for example, has been calling for without a whole lot of success during his pretty short tenure so far as Speaker of the House.
All right, we're going to take one more break, and when we come back, we're going to turn to the Democrats and their significant drama in whether or not they should replace Joe Biden at the top of the ticket when we come back.